Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving straight into a real geopolitical puzzle. We're looking at that period after the Pahalgam attack, India's military response, Operation Sindoor, and then bang, an incredibly fast India-Pakistan ceasefire.
And it's that speed, really, that has analysts scratching their heads. I mean, you've got decades of conflict, rising tensions, attacks, and then the U.S., specifically the Trump administration at the time, does a complete U-turn.
Yeah, a complete 180. First, they're dismissive. Trump actually said it was not my business, basically threw his hands up, said they'd sort it out themselves.
Right, implying it's just another chapter in a long history.
Exactly. So the big question isn't that the U.S. mediated. It's why the sudden urgency? Why the near panic to jump in so fast?
Well, the source material we're examining today puts forward a pretty explosive theory. It argues the U.S. didn't jump in for peace. Not really. Yeah. Or for diplomatic points.
Okay. So why then?
They intervened, according to this analysis, because India hit something vital, something belonging to the U.S., specifically America's most critical and secret military asset in that whole region, the Noor Khan Airbase.
Ah, okay. So that's the core idea we're exploring today, that the attack on Noor Khan wasn't just another strike, it was the trigger, the thing that forced the U.S. to act immediately to protect a massive secret.
That's the mission for this deep dive. We need to trace this theory. Look at the base itself, the timeline of the attack, the sudden U.S. reaction, and what looks like, well, a cover-up afterwards. Why was this airbase so important? It overturned decades of U.S. policy.
Okay, let's unpack this. All right, let's start with the base. Noor Khan Airbase. It's in Rawalpindi, Pakistan. Has quite a history, actually. Goes back to the British, World Wars.
And it used to be called Chakwal Airbase. They renamed it in 2012.
Right, after Noor Khan. A big figure in Pakistan's Air Force modernization.
Yeah, considered the father of their modern Air Force by many. But the history, while interesting, isn't the key point here. It's the location.
Talk about strategic.
Absolutely. It's Pakistan's northernmost operational airbase. Now think what that means on a map. You're right there, incredibly close to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, POK.
Just a stone's throw away.
Practically. And also very close to the Chinese border. Plus, it's a gateway into Afghanistan and right up against Central Asia, the former Soviet republics.
Geopolitically, that's prime real estate.
It's a gold mine. Which leads us to the really controversial claim in our source material. We all know the U.S. has bases everywhere, right? The source mentions about 750 bases, 80 countries, nearly 200,000 troops deployed globally. That's public knowledge.
Standard stuff.
But this source argues Noor Khan is different. It's not public. It's a secret U.S. base.
Secret? How secret? Since when?
The analysis claims it's been operating covertly since the U.S. officially gave back the Shamsi Air Base down in Balochistan. That was 2011.
Ah, right. I remember Shamsi. That was used for drone strikes, wasn't it?
Exactly. So the theory is they officially left Shamsi, but needed to keep that operational capability in the region. So they moved quietly to Noor Khan in Rawalpindi.
Okay, but it's still officially a Pakistani base. How much control could the U.S. really have? That's where it gets murky, doesn't it?
It does. And the source provides some pretty startling details here, suggesting near total U.S. operational control.
Like what?
Well, it cites a Pakistani journalist claiming the Pakistani officers on their own base are basically treated like outsiders. They don't have the clearance, or maybe the nerve, to ask about American cargo flights or what U.S. personnel are up to.
That sounds tense.
Extremely. And then there's this anecdote, which, I mean, you have to take it as reported, but it paints a picture. An American officer allegedly pulls a gun on a Pakistani officer.
Pulls a gun? Seriously?
Allegedly. Pulled a pistol when the Pakistani officer questioned something and basically said, "This is not your area of work."
Wow. Okay, now we have to be careful here. Is that confirmed fact, or is it more like a story passed around to emphasize the situation?
That's a very fair point. The source presents these as accounts illustrating the atmosphere. Whether every detail is verifiable or not, the core message is one of U.S. dominance and enforced secrecy. If Pakistani military personnel feel intimidated on their own soil.
Yeah, it suggests a pretty unusual arrangement, almost like extraterritorial control.
That's the implication. A deal giving the U.S. free rein over a crucial northern base, right next door to some major U.S. rivals and areas of interest.
So you've got this alleged secret U.S. base, cheek by jowl with China, Afghanistan, POK. Why go to such extreme lengths for secrecy? Why put such a vital asset inside another country, especially one with complex internal politics?
High risk, high reward, presumably. The source speculates it gives the U.S. huge leverage, a platform to monitor or potentially act against Iran, keep tabs on Afghanistan post-withdrawal, and crucially counter China's influence cheaply and discreetly.
Without the political baggage of an official public base.
Exactly. Secrecy avoids congressional scrutiny, public debate, diplomatic headaches. It's operational freedom.
Okay, but the speculation doesn't stop there, does it? The source brings up something even more sensitive.
It does. It connects this secrecy to the U.S. nuclear posture. The U.S. has, what, around 5,500 nuclear weapons?
Roughly.
You can't keep all those in one basket. For deterrence to work, you need them spread out, secure, in distributed locations globally so a first strike can't take them all out.
Okay, so the implication is?
The theory raises the very high-stakes possibility that Noor Khan isn't just for conventional operations, that it might secretly host strategic assets, maybe even components related to nuclear deterrence.
Whoa. If that's even remotely true.
It dramatically raises the stakes, doesn't it?
Understatement. It would mean that when India targeted Noor Khan, they might have accidentally poked one of the most sensitive U.S. military secrets anywhere in the world.
And that would explain the subsequent panic perfectly. It wouldn't just be an intelligence embarrassment. It would be a potential strategic security crisis for the U.S.
Making them desperate to shut the situation down immediately.
To prevent exposure, not just of the base, but potentially of what's at the base. It shifts the motive for intervention entirely.
Right, let's pivot to that timeline then. Because the sequence of events is where this theory really seems to gain traction. It moves from speculation about the base to observed action.
Okay, so remember the initial U.S. stance. After the Pahalgam attack on April 22nd, Washington was pretty cool about it. Trump's "not my business" quote was April 26th. They seemed ready to let India and Pakistan handle it.
Total hands-off approach initially, which sets the stage for this sudden reversal. Here's where it gets really interesting. The trigger, according to the sources, was India's Operation Sindoor. This wasn't just about hitting back. It seems the goal was maybe to expose vulnerabilities deep inside Pakistan, perhaps escalate things significantly.
And the key event happens around the night of May 9th. That's when the strike against Noor Khan Airbase takes place.
And it wasn't a minor incident. The reports suggest real damage.
Oh, yeah. The sources clear several facilities were hit. And crucially, pictures started appearing online almost immediately. Photos showing fires, damage. Pakistani reporters later confirmed parts of the base looked completely destroyed. This wasn't just noise, it was visually confirmed destruction. Okay, so May 9th night. Attack on Noor Khan, visible damage. What happens next?
The reaction is almost instantaneous. It shows just how sensitive this was. That same night, May 9th, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is on the phone with Pakistan's army chief.
Not a routine call.
Definitely not standard procedure for a typical border clash. That signals alarm bells ringing at the highest levels in Washington.
So that's the moment the U.S. drops its "not my business" stance. The crisis point wasn't the initial attack, it was the hit on Noor Khan.
Precisely. And it gets even faster. By the very next evening, May 10th, Donald Trump is on Twitter.
Announcing the ceasefire.
Announcing the ceasefire and, critically, taking full credit for it. The source points out he repeated the claim of successful U.S. mediation something like 40 times in the following days. 40 times! That sounds less like diplomacy and more like damage control. Like shouting, "Look over here!"
That's exactly how the analysis frames it. Massive repetition to create a narrative. We stepped in, we solved it, we're the peacemakers. It conveniently distracts everyone from asking why they suddenly cared so much.
And diverts attention from the real story. Their secret base just got hit.
That's the argument. This sudden, frantic mediation, after 75 years of generally avoiding direct intervention in India-Pakistan flare-ups, that's the smoking gun. They weren't afraid of the regional war escalating as much as they were terrified of Noor Khan's secret being exposed. The ceasefire stopped the bleeding, literally and figuratively.
Okay, that covers the attack and the immediate reaction, but there's one more piece. The follow-up activity at the base. The cover story.
Right, this part really reinforces the theory. Sometime later, there's significant U.S. activity at Noor Khan again. C-17 Globemaster cargo planes landing.
And the official reason given?
Humanitarian aid. Flood relief for Pakistan. Remember, there were devastating floods that year. Thousands affected.
A plausible reason on the surface.
On the surface, yes. But the analysis drills down and the story starts to look thin. First, the location.
Noor Khan itself wasn't flooded, was it?
No reports of flooding at the airbase. The worst floods were elsewhere. So why fly massive military cargo planes there specifically? And second,
the personnel involved. Humanitarian aid missions usually involve diplomats, aid agencies, maybe the State Department, civilian leadership.
But this wasn't like that.
Not at all. The source states this is a purely military operation. American C-17s land, and who gets off? Not aid workers, American three-star generals.
Three-star generals delivering flood aid.
Highly unlikely. And who meets them on the tarmac? Not Pakistani civilian officials. They're Pakistani military equivalents, lieutenant generals. It was strictly military to military, bypassing all the usual diplomatic or humanitarian channels.
And the CP-NTCOM connection. Yeah, the involvement of U.S. Central Command personnel further underlines the military nature. CNTACCOM handles U.S. military operations in that whole region. This wasn't USAID delivering supplies. This was a strategic military logistics operation.
Okay, so the personnel and location are suspicious. What about the timing?
The timing is incredibly suggestive. The source points to photos dated September 4th, showing construction crews starting repairs on the parts of Noor Khan damaged back in May.
Repairs finally starting on the damaged sections.
And literally the next day, September 5th, these American C-17s, loaded with military brass and presumably specialized cargo, land at that very base.
So just as they start fixing the damage from the attack, the U.S. military shows up under the guise of flood relief.
It looks very much like using the terrible floods elsewhere in Pakistan as a convenient excuse. An excuse to fly in personnel and equipment, probably to assess the damage, oversee repairs, maybe reinforce security, or check on whatever sensitive assets are stored there.
It completes the picture, doesn't it? Attack, panic, mediation, then a disguised military mission to secure the asset.
That's the logical chain the source presents. The flood aid story served as a perfect smokescreen for a necessary military checkup on a critically important, recently compromised secret base.
So what does this all mean? Let's try and pull it together. The core takeaway from this analysis is that the U.S. claim of mediating the ceasefire, while true on the surface, was really a geopolitical maneuver, a diversion.
Right. It created a positive story, the U.S. as peacemaker, to mask a much more damaging truth. India had successfully struck a highly secret, probably extremely valuable, U.S. military installation inside Pakistan.
And the speed, the panic, the later aid mission, it all points to the overwhelming importance of keeping that base and whatever is there under wraps.
Absolutely. The fact that they chose instant mediation and taking public credit rather than letting the conflict play out or even condemning the attack on the base publicly shows how high the stakes were regarding Noor Khan's secrecy. Protecting that secret trumped everything else.
It definitely reframes how you look at that whole crisis period and the surprisingly quick de-escalation.
It really does. And it leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty provocative final thought to mull over. Given Noor Khan's location right up against China, Afghanistan, POK, what exactly is the U.S. protecting there? What capabilities, what agreements, what assets are so critical that revealing them is considered a greater risk than intervening so dramatically in a volatile regional conflict? What's the real price of that level of secrecy in international affairs, especially when it gets exposed?